Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Do you feel like this is the portal to your empowerment today?
Now that you say it, it feels more of it. It's been a more subtle, subtler birthday. Like it does feel like a portal, but not like in the past. It's just felt like a subtle, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Well, I know what you're, uh, so it makes sense to me because I know what you're saying in energy. You're saying like you're not being so pulled by the ego this year to like make the birthday fit into with, uh, a round peg of what a birthday should be. And you're just allowing yourself to appreciate that this is your birthday and just to appreciate it from that vantage point. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. And there's no, big loud things, but it's still like we went to the Indigenous festival and I bought food from a truck and then I shared it with people in the crowd, just like, would you
Wow.
like? And it felt like I said no, and I would even say this is new consciousness, right? It's no more me, me, me. And like everything was intentional. And I told somebody about the SFT tapping in your website, and Mike had his hat, and they were like, "Oh, you mean there?" Like she looked at, and she took
Mm-hmm.
a photo of it, and it just seemed like everything was intentional going out to the trees, and yeah,
I love that you bought food and turned around and gave it out. It's like spiritual food, like truth. It's like, and people are
yeah,
like shocked. No, don't give me this. I don't deserve it. No, 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 no.
yeah.
And it's like it takes some coaxing to have people accept
Yes, and
something.
it was like finger food, like they had to go in and dig it out, and it felt okay to do that,
Of course it did. So it's really interesting that you wanted to have a session on the portal of your birthday because we know that your birthday is like a portal to a time and a place when you were just pure energy and you manifested into form. So this is interesting using because there's no time and space that connection to your infinite self to like do some good with your birthday intentions, right?
Exactly. Yes. Hmm.
Did you have an agenda to work on today for your birthday?
No, well, no, except I did want to kind of help humanity but all these sessions are so whatever. Yeah, I didn't really have an agenda.
So here's the interesting thing. I didn't know what we were going to talk about or what we were going to do energy work on because you've done so many sessions with me and you've been, you know, an active participant in the masterclass ongoing sessions. So it was like interesting where I received I received some information that's going to be like a companion piece to the masterclass, if that's okay.
Yeah.
How are you enjoying the master class?
It is surprisingly nurturing and exciting. It's uh it's kind of taking me by surprise the way it's fostering creativity for me
Mm-hmm.
and gently nurturing like the higher self, not in a mental space, but through art and nature. And it just it's fitting into my life, and making the things that I like bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty awesome. And I noticed that the hooks of old consciousness are just gently being pulled out with more space for fun things.
Yeah, and I noticed like with spiritual groups, because I was a seeker like you were for decades and stuff, is that fear. There's a trepidation in being spiritual or being awakened, like you have to suffer, you have to lose something, or you have to be just lose an aspect of yourself that that's like foreboding, like looming, like this fear, trepidation. Where with the master class, I think this is the difference: is you're sure you're shifting and you're losing little pieces that don't work, but they're little bite-sized pieces. They're
Hmm.
not like, oh, I identify with this, like, you know, the whole kit and caboodle of like being an actress, being a teacher, being athletic. All these labels that you identify with, it's not bad that you identify with them, right? But they don't define you. Like I know that you've been feeling a little bit like empty and whatever, and I was trying to like tap into why you were feeling so empty because you have so many talents as most people do that are either either they're not unacknowledged or untapped potential, but they're basically like different hats. And just because you wear the hat of being a teacher or author or an actress, it doesn't mean that's your whole existence. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
So the thing we're going to do here in your private session is I was kind of seeing what's going on with you and what is happening in you here. I made notes. I'm just going to pull them over here. What's happening with you is like in the master class, you've been learning about the three aspects of yourself. Do you want to name them? What are the three aspects of yourself?
Higher self, conscious self, and ego.
Right. So they have pretty defined roles. And when those roles are skewed or given um, the those aspects take on different jobs of the other aspects of it, it gets tangled. And so that's what's getting happening in you. So what would you say are the qualities of the conscious self? If you need help,
That's
I can help you.
yeah. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, so that's a problem, right? And
Yeah.
most people don't. Like they
Yeah.
just show up and they just think the whole kit and caboodle, this is who I am. And it's all this tangled amalgamation of confusion, trauma from a past lifetime, and hit and miss of who you are.
Yeah.
So before your session, I took down some notes for you to understand a little bit. And just take these with a grain of salt. The conscious self, its job is to be present. You're the face. You're the face of the brand of Therese, right? So your job is to be present, be presentable. Your your job is to interface with other conscious selves, right? Be observant and be receptive. Would you agree? Is there anything else on there?
No, that sounds yeah.
Oh, the only other thing that I would put on there, which is coming through right now, is expressive.
Mm.
You are the conduit for the whole self to express joy, love, abundance, freedom, health, success, security, companionship, creativity, peace, life, wholeness, beauty, enthusiasm, contentment, spirituality, enlightenment, confidence, discernment, sincerity, kindness. I'm going to say them twice. But the thing is that this, you are the expression of all those things. And when you aren't expressing one or two or all of those things, when you're not expressing those, that's your indication that the relationship between the conscious self, the ego, and the higher self are out of balance. Does that make sense?
It does, but something had a hard time getting in with what you just said.
I know because the ego is fighting this.
Yeah.
So that's a problem with the conscious self. It's been derailed by the ego.
Yeah.
Now, the ego isn't a bad thing. The ego is an apparatus within the self. And it's like a bodyguard for the conscious self. So it can be protected from others, but it can also be protected from getting too much information from the higher self. So when people get too much inner information and their mind works too much and they like feel like they're going crazy, the ego really isn't doing its job. The ego is supposed to prevent you from going crazy. But what's happening with the ego, it's standing out there. The ego's trying to be everything to everyone. It's trying to be the conscious self, the ego, and the higher self. But the funny thing is, it's not just for you, it's for the collective. This is what's happening in you, and this is what's happening in the collective.
Yeah, I can see that.
So are you okay with this being more of like information and stuff? You are shifting as we do this.
Totally.
But okay. So the ego, its its qualities are like its strength. I mean the ego is hard as nails, right? Um it's supposed to work behind the scenes. It's supposed to be voiceless. It's a bodyguard for the conscious self. It sends messages from the higher self to the conscious self. It's a bodyguard and an
Wow.
message, a runner of messages. It's an intermediary between the higher self and the conscious self. Do you
I
see
like
that?
that. Yeah.
But here's the thing: when it tries to be the conscious self, it gets skewed, right? You see that in people who have a big ego. But the other problem with the ego, it's trying to be the higher self as well. So the higher self has all the answers, has access to the totality of you from all your lifetimes, has a totality of the collective, the answers from the collective of all lifetimes. So basically, the higher self is like the God of your existence, right?
Yeah.
So the higher self has your best interest in place. So when a lot of people are praying for answers and they say God is just taking care of me, they're really tapping into their higher self. That's the role of the higher self. But they don't have an understanding of the higher self, so they allot that understanding to something outside of themselves. And most things outside of themselves are pure ego. So that's how information gets skewed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the part about most things outside of themselves are ego. I don't I
Okay,
sort of yeah.
right. So each individual, you're supposed to interact with each individual, you know, interface with them on more of a subtle on uh, you are what you present yourself to be. So most people are tapped into their ego is skewed to their ego is acting like a godlike quality. And the other qualities of higher self, let me just put them out there. They operate in energy. They funnel information to you through the ego. And they are empowered and equal to anyone else up in higher self. So it's like there's no hierarchy of higher selves. This one's better, this one's this. They're all like operate in synergy with each other and they interact and help each other. So you know you're an ego if you don't want to help someone else, if you want it to be all you. If you want it to come from you or you want to be better than anyone else or you want to be the grand poobah of anything, any information, especially and even spirituality, then you're an ego. Now the beauty of what we're doing here is like this is probably putting this information out for the first time this clear for people. So other people will get understanding from this and maybe clarify it. And then they might want to own this and create a whole movement around what we're putting out there right now. That's all ego. Because
Yeah.
this information is the higher selves being able to tap into their own higher selves for themselves. So you can vet anything I say to you, and you do it in our conversations. And I tell you something, and you say, "Wait a minute, that doesn't seem quite right for me. I don't quite understand what you're saying in that way." That's you vetting what I'm saying to your higher self. Now, the test for you is to make sure that when you question something, is it your conscious self trying to like understand it? Is the ego refuting it because the ego doesn't want to shift? Or if it's higher self really trying to understand it for you and make it work for you.
Yeah. That's the mother. Yeah. Hmm.
So when you get information from out there, most of the information is opinions. Now, the thing about the ego in an individual and the collective is they don't understand the difference between opinion and truth. Truth is something vetted from within, and opinions are just something you heard and okay. It, it creates some kind of reaction in you. The fact that you're reacting is almost a gauge that it's an ego and it's an opinion, right? So, how do we tap into truth? We vet everything that we receive. And we trust those who've come before us who have vetted opinions and vetted them for truth. What I mean is like the scientists. Now, what scientists are doing is usually it's a person who's passionate about one thing, like Einstein, the theory of relativity. That was his passion. He understands, energy and equations beyond what most people can. And so what he did was tapped into his higher self and questioned um, what whatever the question was that he asked, and he received the answers through the higher self. Now, people might not know that Einstein used to go into an alternative state. He used to go into a trance-like state, and in that trance-like state, he was receiving the information from his higher self. And once he received the information, he would vet it. His conscious self would vet it over and over with tests to see if it was credible, right? That's what scientists do. They have a passion for one thing. People who've come up with cures, people who've invented things, they have a question. They question through inner channels. They ask the higher self. The higher self feeds them the information. And then when they have the information, they vet it with the laws, the physical laws, to see if it holds up as truth. And there's a whole process that goes on with that. Now, what's happening today is people are just hearing something third party through someone else's ego. That's what we were talking about, through someone else's ego, and they're just accepting it as truth. And what it is like it's ugly energy because the ego is a knee jerk reaction. The ego doesn't sit and like is all knowing and stuff. The ego just reacts. So you have all these people getting information secondhand from the ego, and they react to that information. They don't vet it, they don't whatever, they spew it out, and then they create this reverberation of ego and bullshit. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Makes sense. Hmm.
So let's do a couple taps just to like we dampen the knee-jerk reaction of bullshit in all moments.
We dampen the knee-jerk reaction of bullshit in all moments. We dampen the knee-jerk reaction of bullshit in all moments.
No,
We
to
damp
bullshit.
we dampen the knee-jerk reaction to bullshit in all moments. We dampen the knee-jerk reaction to bullshit in all moments. We dampen the knee-jerk reaction to bullshit in all moments. We dampen the knee-jerk reaction to bullshit in all moments. We dampen the knee-jerk reaction to bullshit in all moments.
So the beauty of you doing this work and doing the master class is that you have an understanding of a working understanding of the conscious self, the ego, and the higher self. So when we do these taps, we're tapping into the higher self and we're tapping into their intention for the collective. So we're not just doing it for Therese, we're doing it for everyone. And because you have a better understanding of how that works, you can be more effective in doing these taps, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why the SFT tapping is so important. Now we have people out there doing the SFT tapping and they think they're SFT gurus. They take the SFT tapping and they use it from the vantage point of the ego, right? It makes them feel empowered or emboldened or whatever. They're still operating from the ego. It's because they're still doing it to fix only the individual, not to like pervade the collective and assist the collective, right?
Yeah. I see that.
So in talking to you, there's an emptiness you're feeling. And that emptiness is the nature of the ego. The ego isn't supposed to be present in the conscious self or the higher self. It's just supposed to be this emptiness, that the strength, but without a defined role as far as mentally, right?
Yeah.
So you're feeling this emptiness in your life, and you're actually feeling the emptiness of the ego. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, the part you said about non-defined, that resonates.
We will we release feeling non-defined in all moments.
We release feeling non-defined in all moments. We release feeling non-defined in all moments. We release feeling non-defined in all moments. We release feeling non-defined in all moments. We release feeling non-defined in all moments.
So your personal ego knows that we're coming after it with the masterclass and everything to like contain it, because it's this volatile energy that's like wreaking havoc on your life, making you feel unworthy. It vacillates between, you know how there's a part of you that feels like really empowered, like you can do anything, and that's the higher self. That's the higher self. But that little, and then there's a part of you that feels like nothing. That's like the ego and stuff, and they get tangled in your conscious self. So the ego knows that we're coming to put it back in a container, right? It's almost like there's a there's a lid on the higher self. There's a lid between the conscious self and the higher self, and it's just this lid. And so it siphons the information in really simply, and that's the ego.
Mm-hmm.
But this ego is out of control. It's like a lid that's off. And
Mm,
it's like we're trying to
mm,
recalibrate the lid onto the conscious self, and the ego is fighting it.
mm-hmm.
So it knows everything that you are, everything that you could possibly be, your higher self has access to. And because your higher self has access to it, so does the ego. So the ego knows how to circumnavigate you trying to put it in its place. So it hides in plain sight.
Mm,
The way the ego hides in plain sight is it goes back to that nothingness state and makes you feel like nothing you do matters. Nothing matters. And so that's the ego shtick. Does that make
mm.
sense?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be neutral, but it gets derailed, and then once someone, as if it was a person, once something gets a taste of something, it doesn't want to go back to its
Yeah.
natural state. We release the volatility of the ego in all moments.
We release the volatility of the ego in all moments. We release the volatility of the ego in all moments. We release the volatility of the ego in all moments. We release the volatility of the ego in all moments. We release the volatility of the ego in all moments.
So here's something really kind of profound, because when we do this work, it sounds like we're bashing the ego, right? And the ego adopts a personality. So the ego is basically feeling like we're demonizing it. So the way to help placate the ego and put it in its place is to love it. And it sounds like an oxymoron. Here it's out of control, and it's like demanding all this attention. It's demanding attention for the conscious self, and it's showing up like it's the higher self. But you have to separate the ego from these mechanisms and validate it for its original role, because we need the ego in its original role. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can feel it calming as you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to sing something, and it sounds so stupid, but we're going to not only calm your ego, but the universal mind, which is the ego, the collective ego, which is out of control. And there's some songs out there that do this. And that's the beauty of music. Is music can shift consciousness. Unfortunately, if music is written in ego, it can be very angry and very ugly, or very bombastic and controlling. But if you get a true artist, like a John Denver, Simon Garfunkel, Billy Joel, then they're tapping into their higher self, and they're actually offering their higher self for this song up to the collective. So if you can't access your own higher self for this song, you can access their higher self and use it to access your higher self. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mhm.
The problem is some of these singers and songwriters, they become worshipped now. And when they get worshipped, so, I'm not saying they accept it, but when people try to worship them, it becomes an imbalance in them if they're not clear enough or strong enough to refute that, right?
Yeah.
So you can see the difference between a singer, songwriter who does the work and is reverent in the work and understands that um, just one little piece of it, or if they take on an ego and they wish to be worshipped,
Yeah.
right? In every heart there is a room, a sanctuary safe and strong, to to heal to heal the wounds of lovers past, until a new one comes along. I spoke to you in cautious tones. You answered me with no pretense. And still I feel I've said too much. My silence. So what's interesting is I'm singing this, I see how this is a dialogue not between a man and a woman, but between the higher self, the conscious self, and the ego. That's why this song is so profound. So I'm going to start over and listen to it from
Yeah.
the higher self talking to the conscious self and the ego, whatever. All right? I spoke to you in cautious tones. You answered me with no pretense. And still I feel I've said too much. My silence is my self-defense. And every time I've held a rose, it seems I've only felt the thorns. And so it goes, and so it goes. And so must you. See, there's releases in that. And so it goes. And we release the grip of the ego in our moments.
We release the grip of the ego in all moments. We release the grip of the ego in all moments. We release the grip of the ego in all moments. We release the grip of the ego in all moments. We release the grip of the ego in all moments.
We remove the nails on the teeth of the ego in all moments.
We remove the nails and teeth of the ego in all moments. We remove the nails and teeth of the ego in all moments. We remove the nails and teeth of the ego in all moments. We remove the nails and teeth of the ego in all moments. We remove the nails and teeth of the ego in all moments.
We ease the reactionary. We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments.
We release the reactionary. I lost it.
We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments.
We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments. We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments. We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments. We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments. We release the reactionary makeup of the ego in all moments. I'm
So,
having all kinds of physical
yeah,
reaction.
I know. And then my computer was doing something at the same time. And every time I've held a rose, it seems I've only felt the thorns. We release being sabotaged by the ego in all moments.
We release being sabotaged by the ego in all moments. We release being sabotaged by the ego in all moments. We release being sabotaged by the ego in all moments. We release being sabotaged by the ego in all moments. We release being sabotaged by the ego in all moments.
So, anytime you feel beat up and chewed up and whatever, that's the ego. And the ego is going to be beat up and chewed up because it's not its role to be the face of the self. It's not the storefront. So
Yeah,
you can gauge whatever things you're out of alignment with: joy, love, abundance, freedom, health, success, blah, blah, blah. You can see where the ego is inserting itself when you don't have those things. Because the ego thinks it knows better. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So when I'm telling you all this, what's going on inside your own process?
It's like this flow, and then there's like I can feel kind of whoa, and then openness, but and the physical reactions. It's a lot going on.
So what would be good, and this is a companion piece for the master class, right? You can see how this works with the information from the master class and makes it really
Yeah,
juicy.
yeah.
Um, are you enjoying the master class? Is it
Oh, very much. Yeah,
okay?
loving it.
Um, so what I would do for homework for you, and you can bring that to the next master class, is to figure out how to separate the conscious self, the ego, and the higher self, and the attributes of which, and see when the ego is overflowing into the conscious self and when the higher self is overflowing into the ego, which makes it overflow into the conscious self.
Yeah, it's huge.
Now, see, like a narcissist, someone who's a narcissist doesn't even have access to their higher self. You know how I know? It's because the higher self has information on everything you've experienced. So if in a past lifetime you've had the pain of being starved or tortured or whatever, the higher self is going to be able to feed that to the conscious self, and it'll show up as compassion. So usually a narcissist will vacillate between feeling really strong and emboldened or feeling unworthy. And so what they're doing is tapping into the empowerment that is coming from the ego and not the higher self. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So in the world, in the collective, there's this overriding propensity for the universal mind or the universal ego to snuff out higher consciousness. People are trying to understand, trying to figure out what's going on in the world, where they want you to burn books and not go to college and not to think for yourself. What's happening is the universal mind is trying to take over the providence of the conscious self, not only in each individual. You see these huge, out of control egos trying to will other individuals, they're trying to subjugate other conscious selves into like bend into their will. So this universal ego is emboldening some individuals to do its bidding, and then it's trying to subjugate anyone who's tapped into the higher self to disconnect from the higher self. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I see the masterclass doing is strengthening the flow and connection to the higher self.
Absolutely. So, and we see all the resistance to doing this work. The
Yeah.
ego is working overtime to prevent this master class from going out there because I'm not comparing myself to Einstein, but I'm just saying how Einstein fixated on one thing and got the answers about one thing. This is the wheelhouse where I fixate on how
Yeah.
to free individuals, how to give them access to their empowerment, what's getting in the way, why isn't humanity waking up? If if the God that people are worshiping out there is all knowing and all prevalent, why is it getting pitted against each other? Because that's not the way it is. That's ego, right? That's a universal mind.
That's the most exciting part of the class is that it's everybody, they said that it's within you, but it's like, but it's like, yeah, your higher self, and I don't have to go outside myself, and it's juicy. I mean, it's like the discoveries are better than you think.
Yeah, and actually Jesus did say that when his time is like what I do you can do and more. He was trying to get people to not come to him for their answers but go within. So what's really interesting is his whole teaching is about go within. But when people get questions and go within and then they go to their faith leader and the
Yeah,
faith leader says don't question. No, that's a sin, you know. That's derailing the whole point of Jesus's teachings, right?
yeah,
Now, in the old days, when people were more like they didn't have the ability to discern so much, they would turn to their clergy, they would turn to their priests, they would turn to the pontiff, and they would trust that that person was tapping into their higher self, and that they could trust that that person's higher self was operating for the good of them. And you see less and less examples, you see less and less examples of someone in those positions who's actually operating consciously
Yep.
in providing access to someone's higher self through their presence, right?
Yep.
So actually, so what this work with the master class is actually doing, it's kind of like a rogue way for the higher self to gain access through the conscious self. You don't have a religion to do it. You don't have an understanding of anyone ethical out there. So you have to learn to understand this for yourself and own it for yourself. And not
Yeah.
look at like, oh, Jen, she's overweight. She's not a size 5. Oh, she's not that. She's hard to listen to. You're not looking to my conscious self, whatever. You're just taking the information I give you, and in energy, I can give you access to higher self, but only for the purpose of you tapping into your own higher self and
Mm.
not in the role of ego at all.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
The problem is the ego has been so on autopilot that the conscious self of most people is shell shocked, right?
Mm.
We remove the ego from autopilot in all moments.
We remove the ego from autopilot in all moments. We remove the ego from autopilot in all moments. We remove the ego from autopilot in all moments. We remove the ego from autopilot in all moments. We remove the ego from autopilot in all moments.
Now, since you and I are so excited about sharing the accessibility to the higher self with everyone out there, that intention alone can help these taps be more effective. So we immediately disengage the universal mind from autopilot in all moments.
We immediately disengage the universal mind from autopilot in all moments. We immediately disengage the universal mind from autopilot in all moments. We immediately disengage the universal mind from autopilot in all moments. We immediately disengage the universal mind from autopilot in all moments. We immediately disengage the universal mind from autopilot in all moments.
Now, there's a lot of factions out there that worship the universal mind as the highest. When 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was talking about the higher self or whatever, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the astral, causal, and mental realms were considered like heaven. And Jesus said, I knew someone caught up in the third heaven. He was talking about the different levels of consciousness. But those are still all aspects of the ego. But people resent when you say, even the I am that I am, which is sacred, goes up to the mental realms. And the mental realms is the seat of empowerment for the ego. So if you're only accessing the mental realms, you still have a ways to go to disengage the ego. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I giving you any new information? Because you've heard all this from me before.
Yeah, it feels new. Um, I uh it's kind of I feel as if something's happening as we're having this, you know, as you're talking.
Well, the intention is for 8 billion people to access their universal higher self, right?
Yeah.
Not just the conscious mind, which is a step up for a lot of people, but that could be dangerous if everyone was in their, ego and they weren't able to like access higher self.
Yeah.
But the way I worded the last tap, some people will take umbrage of. because it says the universal mind, and they're still worshiping the universal mind. We release the worship of the universal mind in all moments.
We release the worship of the universal mind in all moments. We release the worship of the universal mind in all moments. We release the worship of the universal mind in all moments. We release the worship of the universal mind in all moments. We release the worship of the universal mind in all moments.
The rampage of the collective ego is immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments.
The rampage of the collective ego is immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. The rampage of the collective ego is immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. The rampage of the collective ego is immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. The rampage of the collective ego is immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. The rampage of the collective ego is immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments.
And that is why my eyes are closed. It's just as well for all I've seen. And so it goes, and so it goes, and so must you soon, I suppose. But if my silence made you leave, well, that will be my worst mistake. But you can make decisions too, and you can have this heart to break. We thwart the muting of we thwart the muting of higher consciousness in all moments.
We thwart the muting of higher consciousness in all moments. We thwart the muting of higher consciousness in all moments. We thwart the muting of higher consciousness in all moments. We thwart the muting of higher consciousness in all moments. We thwart the muting of higher consciousness in all moments.
The floodgates of higher consciousness are opened in all moments.
The floodgates of higher consciousness are opened in all moments. The floodgates of higher consciousness are opened in all moments. The floodgates of higher consciousness are opened in all moments. The floodgates of higher consciousness are opened in all moments. The floodgates of higher consciousness are opened in all moments.
All sabotages of the collective ego are immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments.
All sabotages of the collective ego are immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. All sabotages of the collective ego are immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. All sabotages of the collective ego are immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. All sabotages of the collective ego are immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments. All sabotages of the collective ego are immediately collapsed and dissolved in all moments.
All attacks of the collective ego are immediately disarmed in all moments.
All attacks of the collective ego are immediately disarmed in all moments. All attacks of the collective ego are immediately disarmed in all moments. All attacks of the collective ego are immediately disarmed in all moments. All attacks of the collective ego are immediately disarmed in all moments. All attacks of the collective ego are immediately disarmed in all moments.
What are you feeling?
It's something like, this is awesome work. It's like I just feel like, yeah, this is good.
What do you feel? Your conscious self. Do you feel important?
Yeah, I feel like I'm living my purpose. I mean, I feel
So, can you hold on to the difference between being important as an individual and the bullshit of um, being all that? That's what you have to challenge in yourself is whatever feeling you have, a feeling unworthy, feeling empowered, or whatever, you have to go back to what is the conscious mind, what is the ego, what is the higher self, and know which one you're accessing. And challenge the ego all the time. The volatile nature of the collective ego is immediately dissipated in all moments.
the volatile nature of the collective ego is immediately dissipated in all moments. The volatile nature of the collective ego is immediately dissipated in all moments. The volatile nature of the collective ego is immediately dissipated in all moments. The volatile nature of the collective ego is immediately dissipated in all moments. The volatile nature of the collective ego is immediately dissipated in all moments.
Are you feeling these in real time?
I am. And there's some noise I'm hearing. I don't know.
Is it an inner sound?
No, I actually think it's the snoring of my cat that's very
Oh,
prolonged.
okay.
It's very,
Okay. That's funny. So the ego has a couple um, ways to permeate itself, and it uses fear, right?
Mhm.
So it kind of threatens the conscious self with fear, and the fear, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I want to run away, because the conscious self can have some kind of access, even though it doesn't realize it, to past lifetimes when it has been felt like it was really destroyed and tortured and died. So the ego will use those engrams and muscle memory of those past lives or traumas to hold, to paralyze the conscious self in inaction.
Yeah.
The conscious self releases being threatened by the ego in all moments.
The conscious self releases being threatened by the ego in all moments. The conscious self releases being threatened by the ego in all moments. The conscious self releases being threatened by the ego in all moments. The conscious self releases being threatened by the ego in all moments. The conscious self releases being threatened by the ego in all moments.
So your conscious self, through the higher self, is aware of every experience that you've been through. So the ego knows where to hit you in a pain point.
Mm.
Oh, you're not worthless. I mean, you're not worth anything. Oh, you're just a grunt. You were a spy in a past lifetime. That's all you'll ever be. Whatever. You're just a grunt. Um, the ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in our moments.
The ego is thwarted against using pain points against
No,
us.
the ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in our moments.
The ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in all moments. The ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in all moments. The ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in all moments. The ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in all moments. The ego is thwarted from using pain points against us in all moments.
So let's do that for the collective ego. The collective ego is thwarted from using pain points against humanity in all moments.
The collective ego is thwarted from using pain points against humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from using pain points against humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from using pain points against humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from using pain points against humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from using pain points against humanity in all moments.
Did you feel that one?
Yeah.
The collective ego is thwarted from threatening humanity in all moments.
The collective ego is thwarted from threatening humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from threatening humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from threatening humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from threatening humanity in all moments. The collective ego is thwarted from threatening humanity in all moments.
So you can access any experience that you've ever had. And you've had the issue is that the wonderful experiences have a different nature to them, like being happy and joyful and wonderful. Their vibration is more ethereal than, saying, being murdered and tortured. So the ego uses the more harsh vibrations to hold you, excuse me, to hold you in apathy, right?
Yeah.
The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self in an apathetic state in all moments.
The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self in an apathetic state in all moments. The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self in an
Into.
apathetic
Can you start
into
over? It's into.
into. The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the
The
conscious
conscious.
self into an apathetic state in all moments. The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self into an apathetic state in all moments. The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self into an apathetic state in all moments. The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self into an apathetic state in all moments. The ego is thwarted from paralyzing the conscious self into an apathetic state in all moments.
So we're going to do the same tap for you. And when you say the we, you're basically saying we, the higher self, the ego, and the conscious self. We thwart the ego, paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments.
Just we,
No,
oh,
it's okay. See, the ego is fighting this. You see that. You feel
yeah,
this,
yeah,
right? We
yeah.
thwart the ego from paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments.
We thwart the ego from paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments. We thwart the ego from paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments. We thwart the ego from paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments. We thwart the ego from paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments. We thwart the ego from paralyzing us into an apathetic state in all moments.
Do you see the beauty of that tap? So you're doing the tap from the point of view of the higher self, the ego, and the conscious self. So the helpful ego is there, and the hurtful ego is being addressed. I remember this tap that I was given inwardly 20 years ago. And it comes to mind right now, and I was given so much information back then, I didn't really know I was being given this directive for the now. The controlling ego collapses and dissolves the destructive ego in all moments.
The controlling ego
No, cancel. Cancel.
cancel, cancel.
The helpful ego collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments.
Did you say healthful or helpful?
Helpful.
Okay.
The ego's fighting this.
The helpful ego, I don't know,
See?
collapses and
The
dissolves.
helpful ego collapses and dissolves the destructive ego. Or no, the controlling ego, because it doesn't, the ego will argue, I'm not destructive, I'm just doing. The helpful ego immediately collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments.
The helpful ego immediately collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments. The helpful ego immediately collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments. The helpful ego immediately collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments. The helpful ego immediately collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments. The helpful ego immediately collapses and dissolves the controlling ego in all moments.
Do
Felt
you
that.
feel that?
That big time.
We, the conscious self, the ego in its place, and the higher self, we are centered and empowered in the helpful ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in nurturing the helpful ego in all moments.
We are centered and empowered in nurturing the helpful ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in nurturing the helpful ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in nurturing the helpful ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in nurturing the helpful ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in nurturing the helpful ego in all moments.
We are centered and empowered. We are centered and empowered in rejecting any aspects of destructive ego in all moments.
Destructive ego or okay.
Mm-hmm.
We are centered and empowered in nurturing any
No,
aspects of.
cancel. Don't you dare say that.
Oh God. Okay. Cancel.
See, there's the ego on. It doesn't want to do these.
Yeah.
We are centered and empowered and rejected any aspects of the controlling ego in all moments.
We are centered and empowered in rejecting any aspects of the controlling ego in all moments.
All the aspects. Say it stronger. I know.
We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of controlling ego in all moments.
The controlling ego. Why are you not saying the? Can you do it over? That's another sabotage.
We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of the controlling ego in all moments.
But
We are
say it more
centered.
natural because the way you're saying it is a sabotage as well.
Yeah.
You know how it works?
Yeah. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of the controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of the controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of the controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of the controlling ego in all moments. We are centered and empowered in rejecting all aspects of the controlling ego in all moments.
We choke out all wiggle room for the controlling ego in all moments.
We choke out all wiggle room for the controlling ego in all
Look at
moments.
me.
We choke out all wiggle room for the controlling ego in all moments. We choke out all wiggle room for the controlling ego in all moments.
You
We
know,
choke all wiggle room for the controlling ego in all moments. We choke out all wiggle room for the controlling ego in all moments.
So think of any like power mongers out there, narcissists. That's why they have such a thin skin because the ego is so volatile that is if it's presented with any kind of truth, it it won't be able to sustain itself because it's living on a lie, right?
Yeah.
And actually watching the physical conscious self, the health of some of these narcissists and how out of control it is. Either they're into their appearance and they're getting all this plastic surgery, or they're like actually, on life support. It's because the ego can't support the conscious self. The volatile, the collective ego is thwarted from propping up. It's something about propping up that conscious self that's like the control and ego is thwarted from emboldening a weak conscious self in all moments.
The controlling ego is thwarted from emboldening a weak conscious self in all moments. The controlling ego is thwarted from emboldening a weak conscious self in all moments. The controlling ego is thwarted from emboldening a weak conscious self in all moments. The controlling ego is thwarted from emboldening a weak conscious self in all moments. The controlling ego is thwarted from emboldening a weak conscious self in all moments.
All those emboldened by a controlling ego are immediately all those weak in character, all those weak in character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments.
All those weak in character are immediately disconnected from
The controlling ego.
the controlling ego in all. Boy, I just
You
lost
got
that.
it. All those weak in character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego. And we're actually doing battle right now.
I know. And it's funny because I keep getting interruptions on
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Don't lose this. Don't knock me
Okay.
off of this. All those lacking character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments.
All those lacking character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All those lacking character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All those lacking character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All those lacking character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All those lacking character are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments.
The, the controlling ego is immediately thwarted from cock blocking higher self in all moments.
The controlling ego is immediately thwarted from cock blocking higher self in all moments. The controlling ego is immediately thwarted from cock blocking higher self in all moments. The controlling ego is immediately thwarted from cock blocking higher self in all moments. The controlling ego is immediately thwarted from cock blocking higher self in all moments. The controlling ego is immediately thwarted from cock blocking higher self in all moments.
All, all individuals are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments.
All individuals are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All individuals are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All individuals are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All individuals are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments. All individuals are immediately disconnected from the controlling ego in all moments.
All individuals, all individuals are reconnected to their higher self in all moments.
All individuals are reconnected to their higher self in all moments. All individuals are reconnected to their higher self in all moments. All individuals are reconnected to their higher self in all moments. All individuals are reconnected to their higher self in all moments. All individuals are reconnected to their higher self in all moments.
Accountability is immediately infused in the helpful ego of all beings in all moments.
Accountability is immediately infused into the helpful ego of all beings in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into all
Into the
individual
helpful ego, into the
all
helpful ego.
into the helpful ego of all beings in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into all individual
Into the helpful ego of all beings.
into the helpful ego of all beings in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the helpful ego of all beings in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the helpful ego of all beings in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the helpful ego of all beings in all moments.
Victim consciousness is immediately extracted from all beings in all moments.
Victim consciousness is immediately extracted from all beings in all moments. Victim consciousness is immediately extracted from all beings in all moments. Victim consciousness is immediately extracted from all beings in all moments. Victim consciousness is immediately extracted from all beings in all moments. Victim consciousness is immediately extracted from all beings in all moments.
All beings are realigned with their. Um, See, we're doing energy work here, and this is. So, what we're doing is like we're extracting all of that volatile ego, which you see all over the place, and reconnecting people with the accountability of their natural, their organic ego. So, all beings are realigned with the accountability of their helpful ego in all moments.
All beings are realigned with the accountability of their helpful ego in all moments. All beings are realigned with the accountability of their helpful ego in all moments. All beings are realigned with the accountability of their helpful ego in all moments. All beings are realigned with the accountability of their helpful ego in all moments. All beings are realigned with the accountability of their helpful ego in all moments.
So, what that's doing in energy is do you feel like that integrity of a 5-star general who's earned his stripes and has that integrity and walks in integrity? That is the helpful ego. Think of it like that. So, we're infusing that accountability into all beings again. All beings, all beings are centered and empowered in the accountability of the helpful ego in all moments.
All beings are centered and empowered in the accountability of the helpful ego in all moments. All beings are centered and empowered in the help
The
in the
accountability.
accountability of the helpful ego in all moments. All beings are centered and empowered in the accountability of the helpful ego in all moments. All beings are centered and empowered in the accountability of the helpful ego in all moments. All beings are centered and empowered in the accountability of the helpful ego in all moments.
All beings resonate, emanate, and are interconnected with all life in accountability in all moments.
All beings resonate, emanate, and are interconnected with all life in accountability in all moments. All beings resonate, emanate, and are interconnected with all life in accountability in all moments. All beings resonate, emanate, and are interconnected with all life in accountability in all moments. All beings resonate, emanate, and are interconnected with all life in accountability in all moments. All beings resonate, emanate, and are interconnected with all life in accountability in all moments.
One more tap. Accountability is immediately infused in the sound frequency and the light emanation of the collective in all moments.
Accountability is immediately infused in the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective in all moments.
Just say into, though.
Into the collective.
Into the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective.
Could you say it one more time?
Accountability is immediately infused into the sound frequency and the light emanation of the collective in all moments.
Accountability is immediately infused into the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective in all moments. Accountability is immediately infused into the sound frequency and light emanation of the collective in all moments.
Take a deep breath. So that what needs to happen, there was some time when accountability mattered, and someone would like go to prison if they knew they had done wrong, and it was more of a prison to not be accountable than to go to prison, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So this is what we have to get back to, and this intentional infusing aspects of higher consciousness back into the collective is actually what's necessary to be done. So thank you for doing this session. Can we share this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what I would do is invite anybody who sees this, who is moved by this, to either get a private session with me and move the collective into more balance. Because every time we do one of these sessions, we move the collective more into balance. So I would welcome anyone to come do that. But also come be a part of the master class, because we're teaching and emboldening the higher self in all beings. So the collective doesn't have to be at the mercy of these obnoxious egos anymore.
Awesome. Yeah. It's
Did you like?
yeah, I mean, I really feel so many shifts from this session. And I mean, and I've had many sessions. I just, there's something about knowing why I'm here and doing this work that is extremely satisfying. So I
Yeah.
just,
What's exciting for me and Marvin is, like, there's shit happening in the news all the time, but when you're doing the work, your spiritual work, it doesn't like knock you pillar to post. It's research. What's your higher self wants you to know for this, and how can you use your conscious self to activate the higher self to empower the collective higher self, right?
yeah, yeah, pretty
So
cool.
I hope you're enjoying your birthday, and thank you so much for using your portal of your birthday in this way. I think um it's almost like a donation to humanity.
I know, but I feel like I win too, it's like it's a win.
Of course.
It's a win. It's
Yeah, and
really, it's,
I feel like I win too, because I learned more information about, how to free humanity from these psychic things. Like,
yeah,
in my lifetime as Madame Blavatsky, I was making people more aware of the astral realm and how to be emboldened in the astral realm. So it's really disheartening for me to see people out there using it to wield power and control and not using it to help free people. That's one thing. But in this lifetime, I realized I'm educating people more on the causal realm, where the Akashic records are and how to embolden themselves in the Akashic records. And so hopefully this information will really help people be emboldened and take ownership of themselves and their higher self and their potential. So thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I will talk to you in the master class. So
All right. Thank you so much.